Hi, I'm Holly Cusimano. If you're like me, when you see photographs being sold at yard sales or antique malls, and these are photos of unknown people, you feel a little sad. I like to give these people a name and a backstory. And I use scans and prints of these photographs in my artwork. So on the upcoming slides, I'll quickly show you the process I use. I get a lot of questions about using encaustic wax and paint in my artwork. So I hope you enjoy it. And if you're interested in looking at more of my work, go to hollycusimano.com. See ya. The first thing I need to do, of course, is to select a photo. I have maybe 200 of them that I've collected over the years. Then I scan and print it. With watercolors, I highlight the photo just a little bit. I don't want to really colorize it, but I do think it adds a lot of life to put a little bit of color. So using watercolors, I highlight the person. In this case, I put some mahogany colored watercolor paint on her hair and gave her some pink lips. One thing I've learned over the years is not to use the encaustic wax as a primary glue. Instead, most artists working in this media use Yes paste. It's quite thick and it is water soluble, so you can thin it and brush it on the back of the portrait. You do have to be careful not to get paste on the encaustic board because it creates a resist for the future layers. This is a step that I never feel like doing, and actually I sometimes forget, but it does save time in the end, and that is just applying some painter's tape to the edges and also sometimes the entire back. In this case, because this was not a very messy project, I just ran the tape around the edges and folded it toward the back. Someone told me early on to use some 2x4s to elevate your work off of your work surface. And I think this is a good tip. That extra inch or two of space between your board and your work surface is a good thing. I cover my work surface with vinyl tablecloth, so obviously with a lot of heat that would melt. One of the benefits of attending workshops and encaustic conferences is that you learn some things that you normally would not come across. And I think this is a good idea. There is a product called Invisible Glove, which mechanics use, and it protects them from potentially toxic materials. So this just glides on your hands. It's tacky at first, but it dries quickly. And I guess it creates a seal between you and your paint, and it washes off with water. Most people are totally unfamiliar with encaustic paint, and so I thought I'd show a slide of what it looks like. And it basically feels sort of like a candle. It is made of beeswax, a resin that comes from a tree, and also powdered pigments. I went to visit this company called R&F Encaustic Paints and watched them make this material. It's pretty cool and quite a process. Once your photograph is dry, you want to apply clear wax as a base. And it is better to apply a few layers of thin wax rather than something that's thick. Having said that, though, I got advice from a teacher when I first started, and that advice was not to fight with the wax. This has helped me a lot because while there are artists whose encaustic work looks clear as glass, most of us are allowing the wax to show. And while you do want it not to be horribly lumpy that it would detract from your work, you can allow some of these irregularities to show. And as I'll demonstrate at the end, I actually highlight them. Some artists call working with encaustic painting with fire, and it's actually a pretty cool name for it. You must fuse each layer of wax into the layer beneath it, and there are many tools to use to do this. I often use an embossing gun and try not to fight those bumps that I was describing earlier. Now it's time to melt your paint. I use a pancake griddle, but there are professional quality work surfaces that heat up. You can control the heat, and I use a thermometer to make sure that I'm working at the safest temperatures. You can use the griddle itself for making puddles of wax, but I often use tins and melt the paint in tins. Also, you'll see the bag, the brown bag there. That's the clear, which comes in a pelletized form. So they're little tiny beads that melt very quickly. And I often just melt those right on the surface of the griddle. In the picture, I show green paint in the middle and 2 of the white and 2 of the black, so that I can mix 5 shades of the green paint for this painting. After the euphoria stage of selecting a portrait and having such a good beginning, this is the phase that I call despair. And I am very familiar with it, and I will not allow the despair phase to get to me. This is the point where there are 2 layers of clear on the background, 1 layer of clear on the portrait, and my first layer of green. And of course it looks horrifying, but I have faith because I've been in the despair phase before, and there is happiness on the other side. Our neighbor's little girl, Julia, who is 11, had asked me to show her how I make my encaustic collages. And when I got to this part, she yelled, "Of course you do," because she thought it was just ridiculous for me to be using this torch to move the paint around. This is why, actually, I don't think it's appropriate for people to teach children encaustic painting, although I do see a lot of videos for it online. You really can't control the temperature of your work if you're using a torch. It's several hundred degrees, I'm sure. And so I'm not afraid to show kids what I do, but I would never have a workshop with kids around. In the final stages of working on my artwork, I generally like to highlight areas with metallic gold, and I use R&F pigment stick to do this. An R&F pigment stick is the consistency of lipstick, and what I do is I try to bring attention to what area of the figure that I want to highlight, and I just run this lipstick over these areas. I'll show you in the next slide what you do next. So I think this is kind of funny, but I use vegetable oil that I pour into a little vessel, and with a paper towel, I use it to wipe off the excess gold paint on the encaustic collage. The paint stays in the little divots, and it just, I think, does a great job in cleaning up. There's very little debris, just one or two paper towels at the end of an encaustic project. There are many tools used to carve into encaustic wax. I use dental tools that I asked my dentist for. And in order to apply the jewels that I add to my encaustic paintings when I think it's appropriate, is used to carve through the layers. Really, nothing sticks well to wax, and so I carve down to get to the encaustic board or to the photo, the paper part of the photo. And then using a special jeweler's glue, I apply a little tiny, tiny bit of the glue, and I set in this case, some pearls and some rhinestones. I'm sure some people think that this cheapens my work, but I can't help it. I love it, and I think it's awesome. Recently, I had the opportunity to put my work in a local gallery, and I decided to make 4 pieces that are the same size, and they kind of hang together visually. I used the same frame for each of these, and I hadn't used a vintage looking frame previously. I've always used a black, more modern floater frame, if you're familiar with those. But I thought this woman looked really great with this vintage frame. And you can see now that there are rhinestones in the comb of her hair. And actually, if you were here in person, you could see that there are pearls in her necklace. So anyway, thanks for listening. See ya.